say to dress for the job you want. So here I am. This coming Sunday, we're going to hear Jesus say something really surprising, at least surprising to the ears of the listening world, surprising to the ears of conventional wisdom. Jesus talks about anybody wanting to follow him being called to be willing to let go of everything, to lose everything, even their lives for the sake of following him. And it starts with Jesus saying he's going to be the one who lays down his life and loses everything. And to the ears of our culture that are bent on looking like a winner and sounding like a success and convincing everybody that you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, Jesus shapes his movement deliberately on not caring what anybody else thinks about you, and instead being willing to lay down our lives for the sake of good news. This coming Sunday, we're going to hear the story. It comes out of Mark 8, where Jesus has just had this conversation with his disciples about who he really is. And one of his inner circle, this guy named Simon Peter, blurts out, "You're the Messiah, you're the Christ, you're the one we've been waiting for." And the moment he says it, Jesus doesn't say no, but he says, "But don't tell anybody that." Because everybody, when they hear the word Messiah, they picture the consummate winner, right? The conquering general, the king in all of his pomp and glory. And Jesus has deliberately come not to be that, but instead the one who brings God's reign, God's kingdom, God's restoration of all things through self-giving love, through ultimately a cross. And that doesn't fit with anybody's expectations. So Jesus has to clarify. He says to them, now using a different title for himself, the Son of Man, which nobody has quite the same loaded pre-assumptions about. The Son of Man is going to be handed over to sinners and crucified, and his disciple Simon Peter, who had just had the right answer a minute ago, blurts out again, "Oh, this will never happen to you, Jesus." And Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan. You're setting your mind on human things, not on divine things." In other words, the human conventional wisdom way of doing things is you got to make yourself as much of a winner as possible. You have to look like a success. And if you aren't really, fake it till you make it. Make people think you're a winner. Puff up everybody's impressions of you, your reputation. Let people think you're successful, and brag as big and loud as you can, and dominate and belittle others. Push other people down so you can be up. That's the conventional wisdom. Certainly it was in first century Rome, in the empire in which Jesus and his disciples had to live as subjects. And to be honest, there's an awful lot of loud voices in the world we live in today that think the rules are the very same. And Jesus says that's not how God's reign works. God's reign looks like, serving. It looks like laying down your life. God's kind of kingdom isn't about one person dominating and crushing all dissent and destroying enemies. But God's kind of kingdom looks like the love that lays down its life even for enemies. That looks like being willing to lay down everything. So he says, that's where I'm headed. You just called me the Messiah, and I'm telling you this is the way I'm going to be the Messiah, Simon Peter. And then he says, if you want to follow me, this is the same life you're called into as well. Jesus then says, anybody who wants to follow me, take up their cross and follow. Now, in our day, in church circles, 2,000 years later, we use that phrase, take up your cross, or it's my cross to bear, almost as like this cliche shorthand for anything unpleasant, right? Oh, I've had to work an extra hour at work today to cover for somebody, that's my cross to bear. Or I had to wait a long time in line at the bank today because the computers were acting funny, that's my cross to bear. We kind of use it in such a shallow way for any inconvenience. But in Jesus' day, talking about carrying a cross, nobody uses that as a metaphor. Jesus is literally saying, if you're going to follow me, be prepared. My way of life runs so counter to the powers of the day, they'll crucify you. You'll be seen as a troublemaker, as a threat, because to follow Jesus calls into question everything else the world thinks is important. Power and money and status and who you're better than. And Jesus' kind of kingdom just takes all that, turns it upside down, and says, no, the way you know you're a part of God's reign is when you're willing to give your life away in love for other people. The way you know you're part of God's reign is when you're willing to lose it all, because you know that our piles of stuff in the end are worth nothing. But instead, what matters is being a part of God's way, God's kingdom, God's kind of life now, as well as life beyond the grip of death. In other words, the way to be a part of God's kingdom now is to be willing to lose all those other things. Not that you have to, but to be willing to let go of all of it in order to be a part of what really matters, what's really real. Jesus is looking to recruit losers, not people who need to convince the world or the face in the mirror that they're winners. Jesus calls us all, every last one of us, to be a part of his movement and to be people who let go, who are willing to be called losers by the rest of the world. But maybe in the end, we're people who just know that we're playing a different game than the rest of the world is. I mean, after all, if you've spent any time playing different board games, you know there are some where the goal is to amass as many pieces for yourself as possible. If you're playing Monopoly, I suppose, or Risk, you're grabbing as much as possible to control as much of the board, to own Boardwalk and Park Place, to control all the territories on the map in Risk. But other games aren't like that. And honestly, other games are a little bit more fun. And sometimes the goal of a game is to get rid of everything, to let go of everything, to be the first one out of cards, the first one who runs out, the first one who is just free. Maybe in a world that is all stuck playing King of the Hill or Monopoly or Battleship or Risk, we're the people who are just playing follow the leader, who have nothing to lose because our hands are empty and open, ready to go where Jesus leads us. Somebody might look at that from a distance and say, but how do you know you're better than somebody else? How do you prove that you're more successful or stronger or bigger or greater? And we say with a smile back, I'm free from having to play any of those games. I have lost any need to pretend or impress anybody else. I'm a part of Jesus' movement. That's what Jesus is looking for. Jesus is recruiting losers. And if you want to be a part of that movement, join the conversation this coming Sunday, on this second Sunday in Lent, when we take a look at Jesus' call to lose it all, following after Jesus, who is our upside-down King, who's lost it all for the sake of us. Join us then. See you Sunday.